Today on the show, we're discussing every album by Die Kreuzen. No, not Die Kreuzen. For those who don't know, Die Kreuzen put out the best hardcore punk record ever made, then proceeded to pioneer noise rock, then proceeded to pioneer alt-rock, then proceeded to pioneer grunge, then proceeded to break up when a major label finally wanted to sign them. We're interviewing Die Kreuzen's drummer Erik Tunison, as well as author of Don't Say Please, the oral history of Die Kreuzen, Sahan Jayasuriya. They're going to walk us through every single album and EP one by one. If you never gave this band a chance, now you have no excuse. Welcome to Every Album Ever, the podcast where we listen to every single album in the world, whether we like it or not. My name is Michael Mansour, and today we're interviewing Erik Tunison and Sahan Jayasuriya, and they're going to be helping me. They're going to be walking me through every album by the mighty Die Kreuzen. This is a band that I have loved for many moons. Fans of the show know how big of a psycho I am when it comes to hardcore punk. I spent many years as a teenager obsessing over hardcore punk bands, and Die Kreuzen was one of my absolute favorites. They were huge in my life. Huge. They were also very mysterious. It was hard to find a lot of information about them because they put out, spoiler, two punk records, and then a bunch of other stuff that was very different and caused a lot of problems for them career-wise, which we're going to get into. But I knew these punk records and I was obsessed with them. And then I heard a little bit of the other stuff, the later stuff, and I was so confused. I had no idea why they were so different. I had no idea. I knew nobody who listened to the band. The only people who liked them were people that I showed the albums to, so I had no frame of reference. So that's why I was so excited when this book came out. Yeah, this is the oral history by Sahan, and this is a hell of a read. If you're into, the American hardcore by Stephen Blush, that kind of style of covering the punk scene, it reminds me a lot of that. But what makes this special, aside from the fact that it's detailing this one specific band, is that Die Kreuzen they started out, yes, as hardcore punk, well within the hardcore punk bounds and genre bounds and scene and all that, very much. But they veered away from it pretty viciously, pretty quickly, but they were kept in the same scene because people loved the punk stuff so much, not really respecting the fact that they were doing other shit that punks didn't like as much. So it's a much different picture of a band from that era. I learned so much about them. I didn't realize a lot of things about it. I didn't realize that they were the same four members all from beginning to end. I didn't realize how adventurous they were musically, how many crazy influences that they had, varied influences that they had, which makes perfect sense when you look at the band that they would become. This book really answered a lot of questions, and I was glued to it. It's great. It's got a ton of photos that you're not going to find anywhere else. There might be a couple in this video because I took photos of it with my phone, so that's where they came from. But really cool stuff. I urge you all to pick up a copy because it's really, this is the kind of shit that I want to support. This is the kind of shit I love supporting. Stuff that's just passion projects. Sahan put in so much time and like a decade's worth of work. I mean, this was a massive undertaking, and it's a band that missed. This band was like the definition of a near miss. Everything that they did was barely missing when the world caught on to it. They're always just a little bit too ahead of their time. And eventually, when it finally caught up with them, when the world finally was like, all right, we like this music. Hey, who are you guys? They were like, we're tired. We're done. We're going to break up now because we like to eat food and we haven't had enough of that lately. In a way, it's a tragic story, but also it's beautiful because it's a band that never got tainted. It's a band that never got jaded from the trash compressor that is the music business and major labels and all that, which many bands don't come out of. A lot of good bands don't come out of that. And these guys really were unrelenting in their approach to making music because they really, at times, suffered for their creative choices because they were shown to the wrong audiences. They were shown to people who just weren't ready yet. I was one of them, honestly, even though I heard them far after their breakup, of course. Even then, I would hear some of the later stuff when I was a teenager and think, there's something here. There's something here. I don't get it, but I still can't call it bad. I still like it, but I just don't really. Now, going back to these albums, holy crap, I really like them. Yeah, there's something special about this band. And now a lot of this stuff will feel like, oh yeah, it's just, this is like you can make comparisons now. Yeah, now, but back then you fucking couldn't, and that was a problem. So this is not nearly as alienating now. It's a lot easier to recommend now. There's some really good stuff here. I'm gonna go into my picks for the band at the end of the interview, way at the end of the video. So stick around for that. But yeah, I never saw this one coming because I was such a big fan of them as a kid, and really to this day, actually, the only time I encountered someone who was a fan of this band, it was when I was a teenager, and it was a weird experience. I was 16, I think, and I went to Guitar Center with some buddies in Hollywood. We walk in. I have my long hair and my disgusting tight black jeans and my Die Kreuzen t-shirt that I cut the sleeves off of because that is super cool. You should all cut the sleeves off your shirts, kids. And I walk into Guitar Center, and there's one of the guys who works there. He's an older dude, bald dude. He sees me walk in. He gives me a look right off the bat and says, "How do you know that band?" And he said it rudely. It wasn't friendly. I remember that quite a bit. But I was so jazzed that someone recognized the shirt that I was like, holy crap. I was like, oh, wow. So I said, you fall down a rabbit hole and listen to a bunch of bands, and it, eventually led me to this band. And then I said, yeah, you're the first person that's ever recognized the shirt. And then he scowled at me and said nothing. And that was the end of the interaction. And to this day, no one else has sparked up a conversation with me about Die Kreuzen. But I like to think that that's changed now. That maybe some people in the comments will be more nice. But before I keep rambling any further, I want to get to this interview because it was so great of them. Erik and Sahan were super quiet. I absolutely love talking to them. They're really, really generous with their time. We talked for over 2 hours. And if you want more stories, there are some really funny stories that we didn't get to that are in the book. So yeah, go pick up the book. There's a link in the description to Amazon. And here's the thing: it's not an affiliate link. I don't get paid for that link. I just put the link there. I don't sell anything on Amazon ever in my video, so I'm not bothering with the fucking affiliate bullshit. Whatever. Send me money directly if you want to send me money. I don't know, but just buy the book. That's cool. This is Erik Tunison, drummer of Die Kreuzen, and Sahan Jayasuriya, author of Don't Say Please: The Oral History of Die Kreuzen. Die Kreuzen, how did it start? As simply as you can without, hurting yourself, I guess.
Dan and Brian had a band, the Stellas, with another guy from Milwaukee, Brian Beezer Hill, and a couple of different drummers. They were good, but they wanted somebody else. My friend Keith, my grade school friend, he introduced me, and they essentially took me on without an audition or anything like that. They're just like, okay, let's play. And then Brian Beezer left the band, and Dan and Brian said, do you think Keith would want to play? He's got a bass. He knows how to play. Yeah, I'm pretty sure Keith would want to join. So there we were, my oldest friend in this cool band in Milwaukee. After a couple of months of playing under the name Stellas, we really decided it was a new thing. Changed the name, brand new starting point, and it was a good decision. So we just kept playing out from there. Playing Milwaukee, almost immediately started playing down in Chicago, up in Minneapolis, Madison, and things just kind of kept building on itself.
That's interesting. That it sounds like such a regular gathering of friends. Yeah, I know this guy. I gotta play his drums. It's all started back. Yet you guys can play. That's not the common part. Like that's spectacularly uncommon in my experience.
I'm not sure I was so great when I first joined the band, but we rehearsed a lot. They were into it, we were into it, I was into it, several times a week for years on end. Eventually, hopefully, you gain a certain command of the instrument. And I always knew I wanted to be a drummer. Grade 4, I couldn't wait for the fourth grade to appear when I would be could join the grade school band with my little snare drum, which I still have to this day, my little 1970 something student snare. So I always was highly motivated to be a drummer. So hey, let's go with this. And then my first gig with Stella's was opening for Black Flag, which was great. And we just went on this endless tear of all these great bands coming through Milwaukee that we would play with, the Dam, the Gun Club, Flipper. I mean, it's kind of endless. Met bands from Chicago, met bands from Indianapolis, met bands from Milwaukee, from Minneapolis. Yeah, it took off very quickly. Very quickly. It was a lot of fun.
Eric, the show you guys played with Black Flag, that was with Dez singing, right?
That was with Dez singing, yes. And then they came through again. Yeah, that was with Dez singing, and then they came through again, and we played with them again a couple of months later, and they had their roadies set up, get on stage to sing a couple of songs. You may have heard of Henry.
that roadie. I was thinking
that roadie, yes.
Were you thinking like Mugger or something like that?
I was thinking Mugger.
Yeah. No, I always like to specify that, just like, the period of time that people got to see Black Flag. I mean, they didn't really tour too much outside of the coasts with, with Keith and with Ron. Like, I don't think they came through the Midwest with Ron.
I don't think so at all.
The first proper tour they did was with Dez, and I mean, Dez's voice is just incredible, and the fact that not only did they get to see them, but they got to play with them, as someone who was not there. That's just, I think it's so rad.
My first gig with the band. So there I was in my first and final year of college, and I said, come September, I don't think I'll be going back. I think I'll continue with this. So yes, I call it my 13th year of high school.
What year was that?
That was 81 when I joined the band. Yep. So 82 by the time we were playing.
I mean, this is also just it's not super relevant to the history, but it did catch my eye where in the book you mentioned how big of an influence the Nuggets compilations were. Well, how old were you when you were into Nuggets?
I think when it came out, so early high school, just listening to that and what is all this? In a world of top 40 radio, and suddenly this cool double album comes out, all of this great stuff. So 15, 17, something like that. Yeah, I think I was just barely 20 when I joined the band.
Yeah, that compilation strangely is just a real gateway compilation. I remember I was showing that by my brother when I was like in maybe early middle, like 11 or something, and that opened the gateway somehow to like Beefheart and all this other shit. But it's like it seems like just such a simple compilation of his 60s garage rock, but it's really amazing. Even the Nuggets 2, the European one is also, I also felt the same about that one.
I didn't dig into that one as much, but yeah, just where was all this stuff? Okay, it felt like ancient history. It was music was probably 10 or 12 years old at that point when it came out, but it felt like ancient history. Where did all this go? How come I never heard this before? Okay, Psychotic Reaction we had heard, and the Electric Prunes, but most of the rest was definite rarities.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. All right, so band forms. You're in Milwaukee at this point with the band. Cows and Beer. How do we get here? What's going on here? What do you feel about this record many years later?
Somebody we knew was taking a recording studio class course and needed to record a band. And so the next thing so she invited us, and we set up in this studio in Milwaukee, like an industry type studio. You can imagine late 70s, early 80s. So guys with long hair, and and okay, my hair had been long weeks earlier, but it was just fish out of water or different situation. Here we show up, and I can imagine these guys. Is it supposed to sound like this? But of course, it's supposed to sound like this. Yes. And so, one day session, I don't remember if we mixed it or maybe that was her doing that mixed that did the final mix down. But of course, it was just get in there, get out, record these songs, and walk out with a tape.
How'd you feel about it as soon as it was done?
Oh, well, we loved it, of course. 24 track studio, the whole thing. Liked it then, love, still like it a lot now. Yeah. I think it's a real record of where we were at the time. So, raw and still unfinished, but a real good record of where we were, of where we were at the time. Thrilled to do it. Thrilled to have it come out.
Sahan,
Actually got a record. There I was, early 20s. Oh my goodness, now we've got a record out. How does this happen? Okay.
yeah, not like today where you can literally just record anything and then there it is on a platform.
Yes.
It's like that scene
big
in that thing
difference,
you
yeah.
do where they get their 45 for the first time and they're kind of freaking out. Right?
Very much.
Yeah.
Oh, I haven't seen that movie since I was a kid. That was a good one.
It's so good. It's so good.
So according to the book, if I'm not misremembering, this is the first thing you also heard from Die Kreuzen.
Yeah, it just so happens that the first thing I heard was like the first proper release that they had done. They had done, some demos up to that point, and they were on a couple compilations up to that point, which are, definitely worth looking into because that stuff is, super cool to hear. But yeah, I heard this while working at a record shop in the early 2000s in Milwaukee, a store that's no longer around called Atomic Records that at one point in time Keith actually worked at many years before that. But my boss played it for me, actually, no, he gave me a copy to take home. He was really nonchalant about it. He was like, oh, because he knew I was into hardcore. And he was like, oh, like you're into hardcore. And I was like, yeah. He's like, have you heard Die Kreuzen before? And I was like, I thought that I say this all the time, but I was like, aren't they that German band? And he's like, no, you're thinking of, Einstürzende Neubauten. And I was like, oh, okay. I was kind of embarrassed. So I take it home and, Rich is great, but I never really knew him as being a fan of hardcore. So I wasn't really expecting much. He just said like, oh yeah, they're from here. They're awesome. So, I put the record on and immediately I was just like, just dumbfounded. I was like, why did it take me so long to hear this? This is so much like different than a lot of other things at that time. That record came out in 1983 and it's still like so intense and it's got these starts and stops and the vocals are, pretty aggressive and it's just sort of like, it's like kind of its own thing. Like kind of right out the gate, they sounded very different from their contemporaries. And I picked up on that, I can't do math, 13 years later or something like that. 23 years later. There you go. 23 years later. Yeah. Yeah. But anyway, yeah, it struck me as, immediately being so different from other things, but being just as good, and by that point, I'd been into hardcore for, good like 5 or 6 years. And, I knew plenty of their contemporaries. I knew the Black Flag records and the Minor Threat records and, Void and Bad Brains and the Germs and, all that kind of stuff. But this felt a little different. And immediately I started, just asking questions whenever I would see Keith and Dan quite a bit. They would come into the shop and I would just, ask them questions just because there was not really a ton of information out there. But, just from listening to that record and having that sleeve and just looking at it. And then not long after that, I saw that first kind of what they call the public access live performance from '83. And it's them playing, all those songs plus a bunch of stuff that would make it onto the first full length. And immediately I was just like, this is so different and so good. Like how, like I just probably, punish those guys with questions about, what and why and where and all that sort of stuff. But I mean, yeah, for me right out the gate, I was hooked and just so curious just about, why it was the way it was.
Yeah, the public access footage. I hadn't seen that until a few days ago. There's something. It's so honest and I don't know. Even the way Dan is singing, he's like, oh, they're all just kids. They're kids with this stuff that I heard when I was a kid, and it felt this weird kind of bond because this EP was also the very first thing I heard from the band, and it was total game changer because I was obsessed with hardcore punk. From all over the world, I would just dig into whatever I could find, and yeah, this is, I think to this day, I think this would be among like if you need to know what hardcore is, you listen to this, you listen to Pick Your King, Ayaton Yolu from Turvi Kade, and then Minor Threat, like there it is. This is among those, you're set. If you want to know what hardcore is, don't bother looking for much else if you're just trying to dip your toe in. This is because the writing here is just so unusual. Like the riffs are so strange. The tightness, of course, the stops and starts. It's just, it's an immediate fan maker. This is crazy. So after it came out, what'd you do with it? I mean, other than give it to friends and show people, did you tour on this? What happened?
We did use it to tour with, send it off to people out of town. Our first tour took us down through Kansas, down into Texas, and across over to California, Southern California, San Francisco, and then some shows on the way back. We sent it out. We sent some of them to distributors. Also, it was put out by Version Sound, a company out of Ohio, Xenia, Ohio. And so they were taking care of some too. It was essentially, I don't remember what the exact deal was, but I think he made copies and sent us half of them. You can do with them what we can. So sold them at shows, dropped them off at the various record stores. Just did our best to try and get things out.
How was what was the tour like?
Chaotic, a little crazy. I mean, we were kind of like on tour for life. We gave up our apartments back home. We were like, we're going to just make phone calls ahead of time and set up shows and just play out on the road like a bunch of travelers, you know? That kind of came to an end in San Francisco. It's awful. It was the 80s. It was awful difficult to make long distance phone calls. Even though we had been given stolen phone credit card numbers that we were able to use, it still was challenging to make phone calls out on the road. As you can imagine, you know, you stop somewhere for gas, you try to make some phone calls, line's busy, nobody's home, call back in 45 minutes. Well, we got to drive for 5 hours. We'll try again in 5 hours. So that was all very, very difficult, but really a lot of fun. We met friends that we're still with, met people we're still friends with to this day. You know, the guys in the Offenders down in Texas. Great, great, great band. We did a lot of shows with them over the years. They came up to Milwaukee. We went back down to see them. Played big shows outside, you know, bigger shows than we've ever played before in LA. It was really quite a thing. We had this truck that we had purchased right before we left. It mostly kept going. We only had a few breakdowns on that first tour. We did all right. So we did get stranded in San Francisco. We stayed there for almost a month, staying with a friend of a friend, friends of a friend. Lovely Mike Arredondo and a guy named Kiwi, who are all trying to connect with, but they seem to have disappeared. We would love to thank them for that. They kept a roof over our heads, kept us alive. They were really sweet. Strangers. Suddenly there's these 5 of us. We brought a guy named Hubie with us. So we quite enjoy. We had a really good time, but touring is intense, and that first tour especially.
Yeah, I'm not misremembering. You were the mechanic savior on the road, right?
When we had Hubie with us, he's really you know, fortunately we didn't need too much repair, but yes, as I like to say, a better mechanic might have worked on the truck before we got broken down on the side of the road, but yes, it was always me out there with a hammer or a bigger hammer or get another bigger hammer trying to fix things. Mostly I was able to fix things. Mostly I didn't get skunked. We did have to get towed once somewhere outside of Detroit. We threw a wheel bearing and I just couldn't get the old one off. I couldn't use the biggest hammer I had with me and finally had to drop it off at the repair joint.
Where'd you learn to be a mechanic?
It's funny. You get highly motivated. Also, it's possible it was in my genetics. My father raced twin engine dragsters back at Union Grove Great Lakes Dragaway. So I don't know that he was necessarily the guy building them, but he was the driver. And so, I mean, just a little bit of an example of it's like, no, man, you just dive in, start taking things apart and find the broken part and put a new one in, hopefully.
Amazing. So you tour on this EP. It's a bit hectic. You go back to Milwaukee. Now, how does the self-titled LP get made?
We played in Milwaukee. The band The Necros came through, and we played with them at what ended up becoming the place called the Unicorn, storied Milwaukee punk rock club. And Corey reached out, or might have even said something right that night, touring with his wife, soon to be wife Lisa, and apparently they said to themselves, "We gotta sign this band." And so we stayed in touch and contacted him after we were done with the tour and said, "Hey, if you were serious about doing that record, we would love to do that record." So they said, "Yes, please come to Detroit. We'll set up 5 days worth of studio time," which seemed like forever. But, we recorded all those songs all at once in the first 2 days, really got almost all of it down the first day. Like I said, we rehearsed a lot. Got almost all of it down the first day. Brian threw down some guitar stuff the second day, maybe fixed whatever we needed to fix, vocals, and then 2 days of mixing. 5 days later, we walked out of there with the final product.
What was the experience in the studio like compared to the EP recording?
These guys seemed a little bit more in the 80s, whereas the previous one seemed a little bit more from the 70s. I also think that they were a little, well, no, I think they had worked with Corey a few times before, so they had some idea that something strange might be coming through. And they were total pros. It's like, okay, you want it to sound like this? We're gonna help you see your vision. So we enjoyed it quite a lot. Industry, but a real industry type recording studio, but good quality stuff. 24 track recording, which seemed like a lot back at the time, and big plate reverb hanging on the wall that you had to be careful not to bump into, and it was a cool thing. They were a little more in charge during the recording. And Corey was producing because he knew what we wanted and what he wanted. But they were, I don't know, they were pros. It was good. I enjoyed it quite a lot.
So needless to say, this album was enjoyed by many in that scene for sure. So how did Touch and Go handle this as soon as it was done recording and you wanted to put it out? How was it different? I mean, obviously, I'm sure it was more than Cows and Beers, of course, but...
Well, they handled everything. I think we were like the 7th record on the label, so they had experience with getting it out to distributors and getting it produced, getting it pressed, getting it put together, and getting it out to the distributors. So once that happened, it was a lot different. We weren't quite battling the uphill battle that we had been, when we were sending off copies of a single in whatever pieces of cardboard we could fold over and scrawl addresses on and mail it off to people. This was a much more professional operation, of course. Touch and Go, they're great.
And what was your initial response to the public's response?
Well, the very first review we got was in Maximum Rock and Roll, the famous one where it just says, "This is fucking great, this is fucking great, this is fucking great." The story behind the story, I was told, was that they had gotten Touch and Go shipped off a test pressing to them. So they got a white label, white sleeve, zero idea what's going on with this band. They put it on and they're confronted with this, and they didn't know what to make of it. But they knew they liked it, and so that record review set us up for a lot of good publicity. That was great. Tim Yohannan. Got to say thank you, Mr. Tim.
Sahan, did you listen to all the records chronologically?
Yeah, I did. Once I heard Cows and Beer, then I was like, oh, what's this like full length? Let's see what this is about. And, it's quite a big jump between, the first 7-ish and the first album. And a lot of it has to do, they spent more time on it. The production is considerably better, but the band is just so much tighter. The performances are so much tighter, and the vocals specifically are way more aggressive, way more singular. And it's worth mentioning too that after they got back from that tour of the West Coast, they split up for a little while. They were not an active band for, I don't know if it was like, a couple of months or a couple of weeks, Eric, but there was a period where they were not a band. And it's really interesting to make note of that, because they could have just never gotten back together, and we would have never had all these other records, right?
It was a couple months. So it was a bit of time.
Yeah.
So like, hey, this is silly. Let's get back together, shall we?
I'm glad they came to their senses because I mean, look at everything that happened after that, right? But
Yeah.
I think that record, it's just so it is one of the like just most unique sounding records in that genre, even at that time period. When you listen to it, a lot of punk and hardcore records at the time are very dry. There's no really any reverb. It's just kind of like it sounds like a carpety room. You think about a record like Damaged, for example, right? And it's just very dry, very in your face, and sounds great for what it is. But this record has this kind of eerie reverb that it just kind of permeates the whole album. And you can especially hear it on the guitar feedback, which, weaves its way in and out of a lot of the songs. And you can really hear it on Dan's vocals. And, Dan's vocal approach, which is like probably at the time some of the highest screams that you can hear, on in a hardcore record. It's like him and John from Void was sort of doing stuff like that. And you mentioned Tervit Cadet at the time, and there's a band from Boston called Siege. They were kind of doing pretty unhinged vocal approach as well. But Dan's kind of super high screams coupled with that reverb gives it this really creepy atmosphere that almost kind of predates black metal in a lot of ways. It's very atmospheric but aggressive at the same time. And I just remember hearing it and just being just so blown away by just it as just like a completed thought, and at that time too, you were talking about going to the studios and upgrading and like they get 5 days at the studio, but now, you play any kind of music, really. You play hardcore or punk or, whatever it is you want to do. There's a pretty good chance you're going to find an engineer or a producer or a mix engineer or a mastering engineer who is, specialized in that style of music. You know what I mean? Everyone has kind of their special areas of expertise, but back then, it was really more like, here's a studio that will allow us to make this kind of music there because it was so new and so kind of, uncharted territory for people who weren't a part of that community. And, like by someone's standards, like, oh, like you can't sing like that. Oh, that guitar is too distorted. You can't play like that. So more than anything, it was finding an engineer who was willing to sort of, for lack of better terms, like not follow the rule book and just like, let's see what these people want to do. Let's do our best job to try and, capture what it is that they're doing. And, in the case of, Rick Kinzano, who did that record and the record after it, he just really like captured those songs the way they are and maybe, added a few enhancements here and there. But, it's such a portrait of, especially when you look at the album cover too, the album cover matches it so perfectly. It's so kind of scary looking and you don't really know what's going on. And I kind of like it that way. I like that kind of mysterious, unknown quality about it. There's no pictures, of the band, at least on the cover, and it's just, there's just something so cool about it that it still sounds great today. It's still so kind of unhinged and in a good way, kind of scary still today.
A few things that I want to respond to. One, Rick Anzano, the artist for every release.
Richard Cole is the artist.
Richard Cole. Sorry. Rick Anzano is the engineer. Richard Cole. Every release does the art for them, and my God, some of the best covers ever. Each one's wildly different. Where did he come from?
He was part of the Milwaukee scene, and Brian and Dan knew him. I mean, really, right there. I mean, for a while, we all lived together. So he played the part of the manager for us for a while, and he would do art for the posters, and his contribution can't be overstated. Without that art, I mean, I've talked to plenty of people who picked the record out. I'm taking this home just because look at this crazy cool artwork, and then they're confronted with this crazy cool sound coming out of the, so they really work. It really works well together. We're so proud to have Richard Cole do all that work for us. What a guy. And
Amazing.
Sahan, I got to say thank you very much for digging him up. He was a little bit lost to the world there for a while.
I do what I can, but I mean, all credit really goes to Carl Paluchek because he was the one
Okay.
kept just asking, "Have you found Richard? Have you found Richard?" And it was through an email of an email of an email we finally got him back in touch. And I would too. I didn't think that I was going to be able to get in touch with him. And I love his contributions to the book. Not only being able to speak on how he made the record sleeves, but some of the best stories in the book are courtesy of Richard, and some of the funniest moments of the book are courtesy of Richard. He's a wonderful, wonderful guy.
And then the other thing about the shift in sound with Dan's screams. I remember when I first heard this album, I was just like, this is not what I thought I heard the EP. I know what this band sounds. This is not what I was expecting. The screams, you did not hear that from hardcore punk bands. That would black metal screams in hardcore punk.
Before black metal though.
But way before black metal. Yeah. Which is, it's so wild because that was another thing that made me kind of push it onto my friends at the time when I was a teenager, because punk for sure, but you don't know like this. And I always consider this to be like, it's recognizably hardcore punk for sure in the speed aspect, I guess, but it feels to me like the peak of what hardcore is capable of, because I mean, you only get so far with playing punk really fast and whatever riffs and whatever style you have to it. But this is like, no, this is blending stuff that we haven't even gotten yet. This is like, after this, the only answer is to do something else.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, that 100% is because of the fact that some of their contemporaries are people who their entry point to music was punk. Their entry point to music was maybe hearing, the Clash or the Pistols, or the Ramones, and maybe even like just hearing hardcore, like the Dead Kennedys or Black Flag, Misfits, whatever. And those bands obviously impacted what these four guys were doing, but they had a whole solid, probably close to a decade worth of listening before that, and they were listening to some pretty adventurous and awesome music as kids and young adults, some of the glam stuff and the prog stuff and awesome classic rock, and these guys were music fans through and through from what I can tell the time they heard music. So it wasn't just like learning how to play and like putting on the Ramones record and learning how to play that way. It's having the knowledge of all this really great music before that. And I think if that's your DNA and then you go to make punk music, hardcore, whatever, it's going to be different than the person whose entry point was playing along to the first Ramones record, which is great too. It's just the two totally different things. And I think the reason why that first record is so unique is because it's drawing from things that aren't just punk, even though to the listener, it's just like this kind of hardcore on steroids kind of thing. It has to come from someplace, right? And like we mentioned earlier, like the Nuggets compilation, it's all that stuff is in there, and all that stuff is punk and hardcore being filtered through that foundation, and that's why I think that record is so unique, and everything they did for that matter.
Eric, how do you feel about this album looking back at it?
Well, it turned out to be kind of a landmark in the genre that we were working in. So very proud of it, very happy with it. It felt like we were trying to be a specific thing, and I think we accomplished it, whatever that was, even without really even talking about it. But just, it defines a certain Midwestern hardcore punk of the early 80s. It really does. So we're very happy with it, very proud of it.
And what was it touring for this one like?
Well, we went a lot more places. We kind of somewhere along the line discovered that we lived in the middle of the country, so we didn't have to tour the entire country at once. We could go down to Texas again or check out different parts of the East Coast, head east a little bit. And we developed just sort of the book some shows that in places we had played before, where we knew we would do okay, Chicago and then Detroit, and then go a little further so that we would have a couple of good shows, and then put ourselves into a place we hadn't been before, a little bit further into Ohio and then the East Coast, and it worked out really well, and put together a press kit. We finally had some decent press we could hand out.
Aftermath, after the tour, moving into Oktoberfile from 1986. So, there's typically a few year gap between each album. I know you guys took much longer than most punk bands for sure. So, what was happening in the interim?
Well, we were rehearsing and playing a lot. Our songwriting technique really was all of us get together, work on stuff, play stuff, jam on stuff, bring in riffs, develop riffs. So I think I ran the numbers once and came out that it took us that we had basically a song a month. So of course it takes a while for the second album to come out, and then the third. When we were doing the first album, we kind of felt, I mean, we might have even talked about it, that this is okay. It's not that we're changing the whole concept of the band, but we could hear the new songs changing. So let's make the best damn hardcore album we can possibly make, and then move on. We still did and continue, we still did those songs, a lot of those songs for years and years and years, but it was just fun to write new material and move on. And then when we had enough for a new album, talked to Touch and Go, and they said, sure, let's go back to Multi-Tech Studios with the Canzanos in Detroit.
The writing process for the October File songs, that was basically the same as always.
Yeah, the first album had some songs that were together that were already in place before I joined the band, but they were different by the time we recorded them. Somewhere, but I don't think it exists anymore, but there was a great cassette that before I started playing drums, things were much slower. Yeah, you can hear the Wire influence and all of that. But when we were writing material, we worked on it together. It wasn't songwriters bringing in songs. It was the four of us making music organically. Well, let's work on this here. Okay, this sounds good. That sounds good. This doesn't sound good. I know that I had to stop myself. If something sounded like something that we had done previously or we had heard previously, I learned to stop saying, hey, that sounds like this, let's not do that. I just would just quietly try and change that. So if there was a riff that sounded like something else, well, okay, I have the power with band. There I am sitting behind the drums. Let's make it not sound like that. So just cool things, songwriting, working together, learning how to get to a finished product.
To be on the same, because that's already a very musician minded kind of artistic thing, to be like, oh well, that sounds a little too similar to that. Let's change it, because that's not that's a musician thing. To have every member on the same page with that, I think is also, because first you can all play, and then now you're all not suddenly, but like somehow organically in agreement to do something that was not the successful thing that just worked. I find it to be even more rare than just finding a bunch of talented people who want to play music together.
It was a little bit conscious, or maybe just the simple, we're a little bit sick of writing a song and then we speed it up until it goes to breakneck speed. Let's explore different textures, different sounds, different feels. Otherwise, it's just, there needs to be some quieter parts here and some frantic, crazy ass parts in other places. I mean, the second album still has some hardcore stuff on it for sure, but it's not just all million miles an hour breakneck speed.
So I know you also, Rick, also engineered this one. Any differences between recording this one as opposed to the first one?
Well, we certainly knew more about what we were doing and what we were looking for. Corey, I think, knew more of what he was doing. I remember them being a little bit sitting back a little bit, engineering. Okay, we're controlling the studio, we're controlling the recording, we're placing the microphones, we're punching things in and punching things out. But I think they viewed themselves a little bit more as engineering at that point, because we didn't necessarily need a producer. Corey was doing the production. Now, in the end, Corey didn't want to do production anymore. He was running a record label, but a little difficult for him to take 5 or 7 days off, outside of running the record label, to sit behind a mixing desk. So his interest was running the business.
In terms of how it actually came out, Sahan, what was your initial impressions? Because this is definitely not the first album.
Sure. I mean, that first record is so kind of like unanimously like praised. I've never really heard anyone say anything bad about it. I mean, I'm sure I'm sure there's people out there who maybe don't like it, but in terms of like the critical acclaim, it's all pretty unanimous. And when you have something like that happen, especially early on, you can try and replicate that, but you're probably going to fail if you're trying to just do what you did before because you weren't trying to do anything in the first place. You were just doing what you did. I kind of knew, I don't know, I can't remember when it was I heard Octoberfile, but when I checked it out, I checked it out with the knowledge that I think someone told me like, yeah, like it's a little bit different. And so I kind of knew that going into it. And again, by looking at the album cover, I was like, oh, this kind of looks like a 4AD record. Well, when you play it, you can tell that they were listening to
We
those
were
kinds of
listening.
bands. Exactly, right? And even Richard told me when I told him that, he's like, yeah, and I loved those 4D record covers, so that made sense to me. But it definitely matches the music, and it's definitely not just hardcore punk anymore. There's definitely a pretty prominent kind of post-punk goth influence there. Things like Susie and the Banshees and Sisters of Mercy and Killing Joke. You can hear that there. But also, you can definitely start to hear the influence of REM starting to creep through. The songs were growing. Definitely they're introducing melody to the songs in the way that they hadn't prior to that. So that influence is there. But as Erik said before, there's still a couple of tunes that they had written from the early period that are on there. And for me, like a song like Imagine a Light, for example, it's just as good as anything on that first record. It's super intense and crazy, and the band is firing on all cylinders. So I kind of knew to expect something else going into it, but it's just so, again, like so ahead of its time. This is 1986. No one is really blending more aggressive sounds with more kind of melodic sounds, especially people who come from the world of punk and hardcore. So it's kind of singular in that way. But what a cool record, start to finish, and the whole package and just everything about it is so rad. And again, like it's almost like the mystery gets turned up even further because you really don't know what's on that album cover, right? I don't think anyone knew until I asked Richard, and it's in the book how he went about doing that. But it's just it's different, but I guess the interesting thing too is that like when it comes to like kind of the punk and hardcore world, the audiences are the ones that are maybe not interested in having you grow, but the other musicians and the musician community, they're all about growth because they don't want to do the same thing over and over again, right? And historically, even outside of just punk or whatever, you've seen departure records happen over and over and over again, right? Like look at a record like Pet Sounds or a record like Sgt. Pepper. Those are departure records. Or Prince. Where does Prince go after Purple Rain? He makes his version of, in his own mind, his way of his version of like a Sgt. Pepper Magical Mystery Tour sort of record. Or Nirvana following up Nevermind with In Utero, or Weezer doing Pinkerton, or Radiohead doing Kid A. There's so many examples of people that found a certain amount of success, be it critically, commercially, or both, just deciding to not try and, do it over again and just do something else, not to intentionally throw a curveball, but to follow their own impulses and follow the music, trying to make the music that they themselves want to listen to, right? And Octoberfile is a clear reflection of the records they were hearing at the time. You go on tour, and they talk about this in the book. You go on tour and, you hear people playing music at sound check, or you stay with people and they have a record collection. And have you heard this? Have you heard this? And, you pop in the Maxell 90-minute tape and make a mix for the car, of all this new stuff you're hearing. And, you're absorbing all these influences because, when you go on tour, your life really is just surrounded with music. So inevitably you're going to hear some stuff you haven't heard before, and you're probably going to hear some stuff that's really going to blow you away, So you take those new influences, and then, some of the older influences that they had are starting to shine through a little bit more. Things like Wire and things like, some of the glam stuff. It's those colors are starting to, come through a little bit more brighter.
Yeah, you're mentioning also the ahead of its time kind of thing, where every Die Kreuzen record pretty much was at least a couple years before everything that would eventually like hit, which is crazy. This one in particular feels longer. It feels longer ahead of its time than the rest, because this is like noise rock pretty much. It's noise rock with birthday party stuff, and then stuff like Cool Breeze, where there it is. Now you got it. Now you're fucking with acoustics now, and it's pretty. It's the most. I think it's the most drastically diverse Die Kreuzen album, because it still has remnants of the hardcore era, and then stuff that's going to come later. It's this weird. This is like a stew of everything, which I find to be one of the more engaging records. Like this one I listened to so much as a teenager and never got it, but I just kept coming back to it, and I couldn't really figure out why. And then now it's like, oh, this is why. This is the writing here is just so unpredictable. Such an interesting record. Erik, how do you feel about it?
I still quite like it. I really enjoyed it at the time. Love the progression, love the way the songs feel, the way the songs come together. We got better at putting songs together rather than smashing riffs together, which was more what the first album was all about. Just learning the craft of songwriting a little bit. I'm still really happy with it. Yeah. I love the way we added, all the different influences like you were talking about. Sure. Sisters of Mercy, saw one of their early gigs and was completely blown away. Susie and the Banshees, saw one of their early gigs in Madison, completely blown away. We played with the Gun Club, I was watching all of these other bands that, were doing so much. So, I mean, it just came out. Let's try this. Let's try that. Wow, that sounds really cool there. What can I do as a drummer to enhance some of these songs? So I really like that record.
Yeah. And speaking of drums, I mean, it's already so far removed from hardcore. The choices on this one, which I find just delightful. Like one of my absolute all-time favorites is Melt, and that kick on Melt is just Jesus.
Yeah. I was let's see what I can do with a single bass with a single kick drum.
And as for touring this album, how did that go about?
Well, that went it was a little bit self-sabotaging, because we would go out and do all our new stuff and add in a few songs from the first album, but the second album wasn't out yet. So we're out there playing our second album, and meanwhile, people are coming to see this hardcore band. I've heard that several times where people said, yeah, I came to see you guys and didn't like it. Well, they nothing, this isn't what they were expecting. So it was a little self-sabotaging. We could have probably made more money or made more fans if we'd just continued to work on the first album, but we had this new material we were excited with. We're playing it out. We're going to be recording this stuff soon. We're playing this stuff right now.
So this is where for lack of a better term, contention with fans began. Because you get the purists who just want it fast, and then you get others who are interested in what's next. What in the world was that like at shows?
Sometimes it would be a little difficult. Other times we wouldn't know what to expect. Sometimes the show would just go great. Bring the audience, have the audience in the palms of our hands from the first note. And other times it's like we can't get a response, and so it was challenging. But that is part of growth.
I would find it actually more suspicious if every single album from a band was just unanimously praised. Then I stopped believing it somehow. So it's like when you see something like Arturo Fire where it's a little bit more split, then it gets interesting. Then real taste starts to show, or like preferences, I guess, start to show, and growth starts to show. So this is kind of where I think things start to get interesting. But you guys finished touring this one. Now each record really does just not shit on the one before, but it does something just so drastically different that when Century Days comes on, and the first time hearing Century Days, I mean, it's just yet the third band with the same band name, essentially.
It's nicely put. Yeah.
How did that come about? And I'm assuming same writing process, right?
Same writing process, just working on stuff, write a song, work on it, play it out. Get enough songs and contact Touch and Go about making a new record. So I wish I did have I wish I had more of a grand plan I could share with you, but it was just kind of one song at a time. And but then inevitably there's a sound to it. And they were all recorded, of course, at the same time. So there's a certain sound. And at this point, Corey didn't want to do production anymore. And Butch Vig had already done a bunch of stuff for Touch and Go, especially the Killdozer stuff that we had heard and loved. So we reached out to him and came to an arrangement. We recorded outside of Milwaukee, bedroom community. Well, no, it's its own town, city of Waukesha. But Butch was up in Madison and we were in Milwaukee, and this was much closer to Milwaukee, but certainly as close as we were going to get to being a halfway point. So he would drive to Waukesha in the daytime and afternoon, and we would record. A place called Breezeway Studios in Waukesha.
How long did that take?
I don't really know. We weren't under quite the hard deadline, so I think we were able to do extra work if it wasn't finished, but I'm going to say the same 5 days in and out, mostly. Yeah, that's a good question. I don't have a good answer to that, but we didn't have the same, we didn't have to go to Detroit to do remixes or anything like that. If we needed to change something, we could ask Butch to meet us in Waukesha. In retrospect, probably he did some work. Well, no, I'm really not sure. I was going to say he might have done some of the work, but this was still moving 2 tracks around, so I don't think he was taking 2 tracks up to Madison.
With the first 2 LPs, your engineer was, while he did a great job, he's very much not of the music that you're making.
Correct.
Butch Vig is not a complete different story. If you produce a Killdozer record, you're definitely into something. What was that experience like?
He's just such a nice guy and easy to work with. And after working with him for a little while, I started to notice that he had the talent for making things sound good even at the end of a really long day. And we would come in the next day and listen to the mixes or whatever was done. It was like, well, those still sound good. He's got good ears and they stay good. I was really, knocked out to be working with him. Plus, such a nice guy, so much fun to talk to, so much fun to hang with. So that was a real pleasure to have met Butch.
And Sahan, so at this point, we know we're not getting the same record every time for Die Kreuzen. What were your thoughts hearing this one? Because this one is this is alt rock, precursor to alt rock before it was even a thing. This is yet another step before it happened.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably at the time they were calling it college rock. That was kind of the term du jour at the time. And it fit in with a lot of that stuff. Again, they're absorbing new influences, right? And REM is progressing. Their contemporaries, bands like Husker Du, they were progressing. You start to see the early releases by a band from New York called Sonic Youth. Maybe you've heard of them. They start, so things are, the world of, what they call college rock, or, in some cases like post-hardcore, that's like starting. But there's no rule book for any of this stuff. It's just these things are happening because people are just deciding to take these sounds to these new places, right? So they're absorbing plenty of new influences, but something that I love to refer to in relation to this band is something I've heard a couple of people talk about it. I usually attribute it to the rapper Fonte Coleman. He's in a group called Little Brother. And he talks about these kind of phases of influence. He talks about imitation, inspiration, and innovation, right? And so to use Die Kreuzen and their influence of Black Flag, imitation would be like, I want to sound like Black Flag. Inspiration is, I want to make music that's inspired by Black Flag. And then innovation is like, I love Black Flag so much that I want to take those influences and make something that's my own, right? And a lot of times people don't get past that second stage. They're inspired by an artist, and you can very clearly hear that. But it takes a lot of work and a lot of time and also a lot of maturity to sort of not just be a copycat. I've brought him up a few times here, so I'm not going to name him, but there's a certain band who very much patterned themselves after Black Flag. And that was intentional. Their whole thing was like, well, Black Flag doesn't sound like Black Flag anymore. We're gonna do it because they're not, and that's cool. But I think it's way cooler when you take an influence and you take it to a totally different place that's not just a carbon copy of the thing. But with Butch specifically, I mean, his production and his engineering played a really big role in enhancing the new sounds. So not only are you getting new songs that sound different, musically, now you get something that sounds different sonically. And Butch's talent is taking these bands that are, kind of abrasive, kind of aggressive, in some cases kind of difficult, but giving them this really awesome production. And that makes it, I don't want to say it makes it more palatable, but it definitely, it's different than hearing it be recorded in a tin can, right? And it probably gives you a little bit more patience to sit and listen to these songs. And so, yeah, things are definitely more melodic. There's like some jangle elements there, but while some people, retroactively they talk about like, oh, they got more melodic and, they maybe say like they sold out or whatever. I would argue that the later records they're in some ways more difficult because, they're not necessarily writing these like huge, pop choruses. Like they're writing these melodic songs, but they're kind of difficult in some ways. Because they never, follow like a specific structure. They always love to just like go take a random left turn. And I think that's what makes it so unique. It's like difficult melodic music, which is its own thing, right? And Butch, really did a great job with making sure that those guitars sound huge. At the time Brian had this really awesome and bizarre stereo Kramer guitar where he ran 2 amps.
Insane.
You're right. It's just so, I mean, it's the most like coked out 80s idea that someone at Kramer probably came up with. A bunch of people in a boardroom are just like, what we got to do. But I don't really know of too many people who used it.
It was a Ripley guitar.
Yeah,
So you can look up the guy who put that together.
Yeah, the Kramer Ripley. Yeah, just like say it again, man. That just screams coked out 80s businessman stuff. But you know what? Like it's a tool, right? And I don't know too many other people who use that, but Brian took that tool and really figured out how to do it. And all the details are in the book of how he had it set. But he essentially had like an affected signal for one amp and an unaffected signal for another amp. But that guitar specifically has 6 potentiometers for each string. So you can decide which amp you want to send each string to, which is just so crazy. But he used that to such a fine effect to where the guitars on this record just have this huge widespread stereo thing. It's not like layering guitar tracks. It's wider than it is tall. Right. And Butch was right, totally on board with that and, really did a great job with that. And so these songs just have this, this really broad and deep and wide kind of sound to them. And, shouts out to Richard Cole. You close your eyes and to me, it just sounds bright pink, So it's so great though. But like, yeah, there's plenty of moments on there that they don't have the speed of the early records, but there's definitely some really just, tortured, twisted pain screams on that record that are just as, kind of abrasive and scary as anything on the first record. It's just done, at, half the tempo.
I can probably do a whole hour just about the vocals and because I really do, man, I really love Dan's vocals. Like there's listening to all these records, like I've been listening to them a lot. And even like in the car, like just vocalizing, because I don't know the lyrics, vocalizing along with him and like, oh man, he's using it like he's squeezing his voice like this. And it's actually helped me understand how other singers do it. Just hearing him do it. So it's something because he's screaming, but he's also just way up there. He's just way up there. And it's such an honest and raw style that is like, I find to be very inspiring. Because I've always been, I'm a singer, but I'm very self-conscious about my voice. This guy has helped me not be self-conscious. It's like, he's doing a lot for me. But you were saying that the later albums are actually more difficult. And I absolutely agree that the later albums are more difficult because even though they're less aggressive, they're presented in a way that seems like something you probably heard before, that you it's not going to alienate you with the presentation, but the writing, the riffs are difficult. They're different. They're not the standard 4-chord shit you've heard a bunch of times. They're unusual riffs. They're weird riffs. So it's difficult in the sense that you're hearing something familiar and easy, but it's not sinking in because you don't know what's happening exactly. That's why it took me so long to really absorb Oktoberfile, and even this one and the next one, where it's like, yeah, I recognize this, but why is it different? Why do I not recognize it? These ones need to simmer for a while. They're very interesting records, and also because it was before that was such a popular thing.
Totally. And real quick, I just wanted to say, because something you touched on that I totally forgot to bring up, you were saying like, singing along in the car. Well, I don't know the lyrics. They didn't print lyrics after that first record. There's no lyric sheet for Oktoberfile, and there's no lyric sheet for Century Days. And that was, the band's decision and Dan's decision. I really think there's a lot of power in not knowing, and there's a lot of power in mystery. And if someone doesn't give you the answers and they don't spell it out for you, you're, left to figure it out for yourself. And whether or not you know what the lyrics are, you're going to connect with it because of how he's singing, right? It's almost like Bjork, right? Like you may not always know those lyrics, but you listen to how she's singing and you can just hear the sort of like emotion or the intensity in her voice. And that does more for you than any lyric sheet could.
Even, was it Liz Fraser from Cocteau Twins, where she would sing gibberish? Yeah.
I mean, her own made up language. Yeah. Or like later on, like the singer Sigur Rós just made up his own language, right? It doesn't matter. It's just you're using your voice as an instrument, right?
100%.
To convey, emotion or whatever else.
Eric, what were you listening to at this time period?
That's going to be tough. I don't know at that particular point. Whatever you mentioned, Cocteau Twins, I was probably listening to the Cocteau Twins, old Aerosmith records, new Aerosmith records at the time.
Permanent Vacation.
Played that one a lot. Yeah, they came back out of nowhere. They had some terrible records there for a little while. So that one I'm not really going to be able to answer too well, just all the stuff I listened to all the time. Keith had the incredible truck tape collection, so was listen to what Keith's got, new stuff, old stuff, cool stuff, old stuff. The old days when you had to take the cassette tape with you, had to take boxes of cassettes and hope they didn't disappear on the road.
I mean, you think about what's happening at that time period too. It's like REM is really coming to their own. It's like probably the last record on IRS. Think Document, it's like 87, so you're looking at like Document Green period, it's like the end of Husker Du. There's a picture of you, Eric, around this time, and you have that massive Subway-sized Sonic Youth sister poster in whatever room you're in.
Okay.
It's like 40 by 60. It's huge. So I would imagine, Sonic Youth is part of, the diet at that time.
Yeah. Plus we played a lot of shows with them over the years. So that was... even if subconsciously, obviously an influence.
Yeah. Were you guys U2 fans at all?
Listen to it a fair amount. Yeah. Especially those first couple of records and that live one. Yeah. I like that. Got a little lost with them when they got so huge, but hey, they're huge. Good for them.
Yeah.
Biggest band in the world at the point.
U2 and The Cure and all this sort of stuff. I mean, like
we were listening to a lot of The Cure.
Yeah. Not to answer the questions for him, but I've asked these questions billions of times, and influences are so huge. I mean, as you can tell, influence is such a big thing for me because I love tracing. Not, as you can see, like in the book, it's not just their influences; it's later on with who they inspired too, right? So, it's just so cool what they did with that, right? Like you can give 4 people a recipe for cake, right? And you're gonna get 4 different cakes. This is almost 2 on the nose because Eric later went on to, do quite a bit of baking in this time. But,
really?
Well, my wife and I ran a restaurant here in Amsterdam for like 18 years. Although she did the cooking, I did not do any baking, but she absolutely makes the best cheesecake in the world. So I wish I could send you a slice right now.
Oh, man. So response to this album, what was that like?
A little bit confused, a little lost. Some people loved it. Some people did not love it. As regards to selling out would have been releasing the same first album 5 times over the course of 8 or 10 or 12 or 25 or 35 years. There are bands out there still doing it. The reviews were a little mixed. The audiences were a little mixed. Again, once the album filtered out and people were there and people were coming to see us playing that album, things would come along. But, challenging. it could be a little challenging sometimes.
You remember anything about this particular tour?
Well, they all fade together, and it wasn't, again, we didn't really do too much of the whole country all at once. So it'd be like 2 weeks here. I ended up liking doing a 6 week tour. That always felt like 2 weeks to get used to being on tour. And then there was a nice solid 2 weeks in the middle where we absolutely were on tour, and then the final 2 weeks. We were just playing out so much that I'm not really remembering a tour that was specifically for this record, for Century Days. I do remember, yeah, the album has a certain purplish cast to it. The best t-shirts we could find were pink, and let me tell you, pink t-shirts do not sell. That was a mistake. I mean, eventually they sold, but though we trotted those things around the country for quite a while.
This is around the first time that you guys went overseas too, right?
We'd been overseas for the second album.
Okay.
And did some, our first time outside of the country, really. We quite enjoyed it. Loved the different, seeing the different people, different countries. But again, they were confused because they were expecting the first album.
What were those? Were the audiences that similar? How were they? How were they over there as opposed to American?
Well, just a whole different world. We'd never played squats before, and here we are playing squats. What's going on here? Well, they found an abandoned building and threw up a sound system and some lights, and here we are in some real fire traps for a while, and just different people in different parts of the world can be so different. The United States, as different as the United States is, the United States is still the United States. You're still playing to pretty similar audiences no matter where you go. Okay, New York might be a little tougher than Eugene, Oregon, but yeah, it's hard. Again, at this point, there's a lot of gigs out there, and I absolutely positively have forgotten more gigs than I remember. People will post up a poster from somewhere. I was like, that's yet another gig I have zero memory of, none whatsoever.
I'm remembering one from the book about lugging equipment down a ladder in a basement. Which one was that?
When you guys play with Crucifix, I think.
In San Francisco at the Tool and Die, it was really very much, a ship's ladder into some basement, a really steep thing. So it's like, oh my God. And okay, we didn't have two Marshall half stacks, but we certainly had the Marshall half stack with us, and up it goes, and down into the basement. There also was a rehearsal space in Milwaukee that we worked on a couple of times, or that we used for a while, and that truly was in an attic in River West. It didn't have a ladder. It was hoist stuff up through the hatch into the attic where you couldn't really stand up properly. But it was a great rehearsal and a lot of fun. Our friend Don Nelson, his place. But that was the Tool and I on our first tour in San Francisco.
Holy hell, man.
We've played some crazy places. Places.
That's one of my favorite things about the hardcore punk scene is the places that were considered venue or had to be considered venues. Like offices and bedrooms and like I find that to be weirdly enough one of the more interesting things about the entire scene.
Pretty crazy, yeah, from absolutely living rooms, but apparently people are doing living room shows again, but you don't necessarily put your hardcore punk band in somebody's living room, but those kind of things, and just the crazy things people call stages. We threw some plywood on top of some milk crates. Good luck. Well, we do throw ourselves around a little bit on stage, but I guess we'll have to try and take it easy a tiny bit. The PA fell down in New York. Later that night, found out it fell right on a friend of ours, but it was an absolute Spinal Tap moment because we're trying to play one of our slower songs, and they're up there pounding nails into this PA column, and as you can imagine, it's reverberating through the entire place. Yeah, there we are. Okay, that's one of our Spinal Tap moments.
Oh, it's hilarious.
Yeah.
So after this, there's the Gone Away 7-inch and 12-inch On streaming platforms now, there's a really handy compilation where it's the Gone Away 12-inch with the Pink Flag EP, and then it also has I have no idea if you even know this or not, or why this would be, but Cows and Beer is also on the compilation, but the track listing is different. Do you have any idea why it's different on the streaming version?
The CD version of Gone Away has a bunch of stuff that isn't on the 12-inch or the 7-inch, and I think it was probably just to like, well, if we're gonna press a CD, like you might as well use all 75 minutes. It's probably still only like 45 minutes long, but I think it was also because by that point, and this is all kind of being presumptuous, but I just kind of figured, well, Cows and Beer had been pretty out of print by that point, and because it has some stuff from Cows and Beer, then it also has some stuff from like various compilations too. So I might be wrong, but I think it might have like some of the stuff from like the master tape on there, Eric. It's a lot of to use a Who term, kind of odds and sods.
The odds and sods.
Yeah, odds and sods. It kind of just like there's a bunch of random stuff, and so maybe I think the only thing I can think of is that it's not necessarily resequenced as much as just like wasn't sequenced at all. It's just like let's put all these things on there, and that's
well. I'm learning something right now. Maybe I should be paying more attention to my back catalog here.
I don't expect you to sit around listening to your own music here. But the interesting thing I will say though is like it's just cool to hear all that stuff like side by side. And also, I forgot to mention, there's a bunch of live tracks on there that they recorded at the Odd Rock that Butch did with Bill Stace. And it's a bunch of stuff from Century Days and a couple things from Oktoberfile. And, throughout the book, I think the sentence that I rewrite over and over and over again is they were a ferocious live act. And it's true. You watch videos of that time period, of any time period that you can see this band in, and they're, giving it 110%. Just, they sound fantastic. And those recordings, well, sure, live recordings are going to be a really good document of what you sound like live. What's better than having live recordings engineered by Butch Vig, right?
Butch and Bill worked together. Bill did the live sound, and Butch was downstairs, but Bill was downstairs. He knows the band. Butch knows the band. And both of them the nicest guys in the world. So it was fun to do that with them.
But I think you told me, Eric, there's a lot of people who heard that. They're like, oh, that's not live, because it's like...
We were accused of that once or twice. Yeah, absolutely. Why did you just re-release that stuff with audience stuff? Like, no, man. That's how we recorded it, and there were people there.
This isn't a Kiss Live situation with the added in crowd noise or whatever.
One detail trivia is that the tape ran out just as we finished the song. They're down there watching the tape run out. Is the song going to end? Is the song going to end? Or the tape's going to end first? They ended at exactly the same point. So we did fly in audience response from after a different song. Very early digital recording. He had a keyboard and he was able to put a little bit of a sampler of a couple of 7 seconds worth of audio on there. So there was one moment where we flew in, but yeah, we, again, we rehearsed all the time. We took it very seriously. 99% of what we did was play live. We were a live band.
Look at that, Michael. You got it exclusive. I didn't even get one of those. So.
Oh, nice. Yeah, those live recordings sound incredible.
So good.
Any punk adjacent band, if you even, known for having the worst live recordings imaginable.
Oh, yeah.
History of sound. I mean, so this is like, really impressive. So Gone Away is yet another departure. One of the more epic songs, I think, in the whole discography. And tell me the story about how that was written.
I'm not going to be able to remember very many details. We just put it together and refine it over time. And Brian had purchased his 12-string Ovation, so there was that there as well. These are the ones with John Kruth on mandocello, or was he playing the bass flute? Or I should have done my homework. I can't really say too much. Just more stuff, working on new material. One of those songs. We wrote a bunch of songs that were in 3 in waltz time, essentially, and this is one of them. Just the way the song would come together. What sounds good? Let's do this. Let's do that. So I don't have any really good answer as to what we were thinking when we wrote that song. We were just writing songs.
because you guys did that Aerosmith cover around that time too, the Seasons of Wither
The
cover,
Seasons of Wither as well. Yeah.
and it goes really well, I think, with that song. And maybe I'm being presumptuous here, but I think maybe a little bit of that inspiration is there because they feel like two sides of a coin, in terms of
That's a very good point. I would agree 100% with that. Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah, a bit of synergy between the two right there.
right,
I'm
right.
trying to remember where we recorded the studio songs for that Gone Away EP, and
That's
I'm not
smart.
remembering. That was done up at Smart.
Yeah, that was the
Okay.
first time you guys, and I just know that
Okay.
from reading credits, but yeah,
There we go. Yes, I haven't read the
that's
credits lately. I was trying to cough that one up. It had to be with Butch because we didn't
yeah,
work with anybody else. So up at
yeah.
Smart. Yeah.
I don't think it was technically your first time working at Smart because you guys did the singles before that, and something we haven't really touched on yet, Michael, is just there was a few kind of courtships with various major labels at the time, and labels would give them demo money, and then they would go and record with Butch, and they'd be like, oh, this is cool, what do we do with this, because they're not a straightforward jangle band, they're not just a hardcore band. Some of the European press at the time, around the time of like Century Days, I remember seeing the phrase REM meets Anthrax, which is, yeah, I mean, I don't agree with it, but like I can see why you're grasping for anything because it's really unprecedented, right? People didn't really know what to make of this. That, the term post-hardcore hadn't been, invented yet. I mean, you think about what's happening at the time in 86, 87, 88 in Washington, D.C. with the sort of Revolution summer bands. So you see like Rites of Spring and Embrace and, things like Dag Nasty or Grey Matter, eventually giving way to Fugazi and whatever else. They're taking the roots. These are bands and musicians who have roots in hardcore, and they're taking it to a different place in their own way, right? But people didn't know what to make of it. I mean, that term emo started getting thrown around at that time. But when you don't know what to do, you're just well, how do I describe this? Well, REM meets Anthrax. Works for me, I guess. But people didn't, they didn't really know how to describe it. Anyway, yeah, sorry, I digress. But labels were kind of giving them money to, make demos. And so they started kind of going up to Smart and doing some demos here and there. But in terms of what was released, I think this is one of, if not, I think the first thing that they did at Smart Studios with Butch.
It certainly sounds more cohesive and glued together than Century Days had a bit more spaciousness to it. This one feels way more confident.
Yeah.
Well, we're getting used to working with Butch. We were getting better and better, and just that constant rehearsal and constant playing.
And Butch is getting better too, and also he's working in his home studio, so he knows, he knows that room, he knows that console. So you're going to get Butch at his best, when he's working on.
That's a very good point. Working in at Breezeway in Waukesha was not a place he had been in before.
Sure.
So big difference for sure.
So this is around 89 and then 90 for the Pink Flag EP. Why'd you decide on those songs? Was it Atlanta Treason and Pink Flag for the covers?
Those were in the set early from the very beginning. Just a throwback to the stuff that really moved us when we were first playing out. So those stayed in the set maybe as unexpected encore material, things like that. So it's just, okay, let's do these. Let's get this out. Let's do this. This is fun. We like this. Let's put this out.
Since the final album, Cement, in 1991, it's the biggest gap. I mean, there's Gone Away in between, but all those songs are being written in the middle of all this. What was changing in the middle in this 3-year interim?
Rehearsing and playing gigs and trying to get new stuff out. Like I say, I did the arithmetic and it was about a song a month, so there's going to be a gap. That's not enough. I mean, when I later worked with some other bands that actually had like the songwriter or a songwriter, that I could see the attraction of working with somebody like that. It was like, okay, let's do this song. Here's my new song. Here's these new songs. Let's do these. So we did, for better or worse, we didn't have that. Certainly helped define who the band is. This this meld of the four of us. So it's a feature, not a flaw, but it does make the output slower than was ideal.
And what do you remember from the recording experience for Cement?
Just doing that up again at Butch's place. He had we even had to put the recording off extra week or two because he was out in LA working with some little band called Nirvana that we were going to see how yeah, that our record was the very next one that he recorded after finishing up with them. So there he is talking about, oh, and the guitars got stolen and it's hard to find left-handed guitars even in LA. It's hard to find left-handed guitars when you really, really, really need one. Just once again working with Butch, and they're taking care of us, and we're staying with friends as always. But a real relaxed, good, great, top quality recording session. Loved working with Butch. This was great. Loved working up at Smart Studios. Loved the fact that we were there right at the heart of the whole thing. Great situation. Yeah. Very enjoyable memories. And we had John Cruz come in and he played different parts, mandocello, bass flute. We had Peter Ballisturi come up from Milwaukee to play bass saxophone. Our friend Tim Cole from the Crusties, he flew up from Austin to add horns, which was just an experiment. Let's have some fun with this. So we did have some fun with it.
Yeah, that's a very interesting thing about this album. I was going to ask about the bass flute. Is that a bass flute on Deep Space? And yes, it is.
That is a bass flute. Yeah.
Yes, flute.
Very nice stuff. Yeah, this album, man, this one really hit me this past few days because I only heard it once when I was younger, and yeah, there's such a maturity to this one. Again, you can kind of see where it fits in with other bands you've heard, but the writing style, the performance, the vocal stuff, especially the vocal stuff, he's way louder this time, which I found, and the harmonies, and there's certain metallic elements blending with the acoustic elements on this one more so because there's always a little bit of metallic tone characteristic timbre to Brian's guitar and other albums, but this one it's really at the forefront. This one feels much heavier. This feels like the heaviest record.
All praises to Butch and Smart Studios. Yeah. I remember how closely Butch worked with Dan, really phrases at a time and working on the harmonies and just bringing out everything in Dan's voice that was there all along, but Butch really knew what he was doing. Butch really knows what he's doing. Really a lot of fun to work with him.
For all we can say about Butch being to like working with Killdozer and working with you guys and working with these really aggressive bands, like he is a self-proclaimed like Beatles freak. He's a real big pop guy. So even if he's working with like, bands that are a little bit heavier, like he finds this way to bring out the sort of hooky qualities of them. And he even talks about with working with you, Erik, like drum hooks and stuff like that. He's all about the hooks. Even if you're making heavy music, there's still hooks, like Slayer has hooks. It's just riffs, right? So,
Yes.
So Butch, I think one thing you're hearing is him kind of bringing out those kind of hooky qualities and like working with Dan to, really kind of get those vocal takes. I mean, that sounds very Butch,
Yeah. Yeah, it was fun to watch and fun to be part of. As the drummer, of course, most of it is record it, get the best take. I'm not exactly punching parts in like the guitar player is, but and it was the real last gasp of real analog recording. So there he would work with the tape specifically and scrub out the parts, in between the vocal lines, where you might otherwise hear somebody take a breath, or the guitar player where you might, tweak the guitar when he didn't mean to. So Butch was scrubbing all of that stuff out, just these recording techniques that gets done in the box these days. So that was a great, really a great experience.
Now, part of that heavy sound that you're hearing, Michael, is I think probably a year or two later, they kind of did a redesign at Smart to kind of, he had, gotten a little bit of money from some of the records he went on to do. But at that time, everyone talks about the live room at Smart just being so loud, like just this really, really loud sound, especially when you hear it in the guitars and the drums. So, I mean, part of that I think comes from just like capturing that kind of sound in the room. And if you listen to other stuff they did at Smart around that time, it has this kind of not big room, but this kind of roomy kind of sound. And you definitely hear it on Cement in the same way that you hear it on like Gish, which he did, I think the year or a couple months prior to making this one, just these big guitar sounds and big drum sounds. And that's something I think he, kind of became known for. And part of it was just like, that was just the room, you know?
You're also talking about the the hookiness aspect of this album, where I mean the song "Wish" has been stuck in my head for 2 days straight, and it's not just like the super catchy vocal lines, but the drum line is also like you're talking about. Even the drums have hooks. That drum beat for "Wish," it's in my head right now. I mean, it's that is part of the riff.
Well, cool. I mean, I was working with a band here only a couple of years ago, and I found myself trying to sort of rejecting drum parts in my head because, oh, I played this once before. And then I'd say to myself, yeah, 25 years ago on another continent. I think it's okay to call back to these parts, but I was always trying to come up with something new, something different every single song and just, battle it out in my head. Okay, I did that before. Let's try something else. So thank you for noticing. Wish is a great song.
Oh yeah, and every album does have that where, I mean, it was clearly your intention to not repeat yourself, but yeah, that's why you get 4 different bands with 4 different LPs. It's pretty wild stuff. But the sound of this album is like, oh duh. Whereas when you see the grunge explosion, you see like, oh well, clearly they're going to be the next one. It seems like even then, they finally got it. The people finally came knocking right when it was too late, right when you guys split up. Because I mean, it's 91. It's like the one moment where it fully aligned, where this should have hit, but then you guys called it quits. So what was the leading up to that? After this album was put out, the touring for this album, I imagine you guys were exhausted. So what was happening?
We did decide to tour the entire United States, and that might have been too much. We went down south, and then we headed east up through Florida, came up through the East Coast, just playing every night as often as we can. If you ain't playing, you're paying. Passed through Milwaukee. It seemed like a good idea at the time. We would take a week break and R&R back in Milwaukee, and then we went back out on the road and head to the West Coast, and yeah, we were exhausted. And it all came to a head, the audiences weren't getting bigger. They weren't getting bigger. But it was an ill-timed breakup. As Corey said some months later, he said, well, we took massive returns on these records after the band breaks up because people aren't buying records from a band that broke up. Okay, those eventually sold. The records keep selling. I'm very proud of that. But yeah, it was a tough time, and but after 12 years of being in the band together, I don't feel like it was. I feel like it was a reasonable time to stop. I mean, maybe a little bit longer would have been okay, but I think it had really reached the conclusion. I think it was time to exit.
I think when you talk about the ahead of its time kind of aspect, Michael, like, and like you're like, oh, like October Files, like several years ahead of its time. In my mind, I feel like to me, Gone Away is a hit song. I think of all the singular songs that they wrote as those 4 guys, that's the best thing they did. It really kind of captures everything they did well, minus the speed of the first record. But Dan still screams in that song, and it's like all of this just in this perfect little like 3.5 minute song, and it's just like everything just kind of like crystallized in that moment. And to me, I feel like maybe if that song came out in 91, maybe things would have been a little bit different. Who knows? I think 89, it's not necessarily poorly timed for that song, but maybe just a hair too early. But I mean, like, yeah, like they got label offers a little bit later, specifically with Mike Gitter offering them to sign with Atlantic at the time. Like I said earlier, like other labels were interested, but they didn't know what to do. Like when when record reviews are saying REM meets Anthrax, how do you sell that? Major record labels, it's their job to, like, okay, what is this thing? Who do I sell it to and how do I sell it? Well, those are 2 separate lanes, and you can't, sell it to one because it's too REM for the Anthrax crowd, but, in theory, too Anthrax for the REM crowd. So like, what do you do with this? But it is interesting because, yeah, like 1992, I mean, that's the beginning of 92 is when you really start to see all the Seattle bands really starting to blow up. I think January is when Nevermind, famously knocks Michael Jackson out of, the #1 spot, and everyone else starts to get a lot of attention, even if they're not related. Bands that have nothing to do with Seattle are now being pegged as, Seattle bands or whatever. And I think, you know, it was interesting because they would tell me, the band members would tell me, he's like, oh, well, it would be great when we'd go out on the road with Sonic Youth because their audiences totally wanted to, they were interested in what we were doing. But I think because, that first record, and maybe to a certain degree, that second record is so like synonymous with hardcore, a lot of show promoters and booking, or maybe not booking agents, but like people running venues and promoters, they would put them on these bills with hardcore bands. And, by the time you get to a record like Century Days and definitely a record like Cement, I mean, it's not necessarily going to always go over well for an audience full of people who are, I don't know, wearing Gorilla Biscuits t-shirts or have charged mohawks, right? It's just they like what they like, and Cement is awesome, and it has these moments that, yeah, you said it's very heavy. I can hear the classic rock thing there, and I'm surprised it's taken us this long for any of us to bring it up. But like Cheap Trick is obviously a huge influence on these guys, especially the Rockford half, the two of them that are originally from Rockford, but you hear that stuff, and the three of us can, we hear it for what it is, but I think for maybe a more kind of narrow-minded audience, they're not going to know what to make of that. It's not punk. I'm using air quotes here, right? It's not punk. So
to put Die Kreuzen on the same bill as hardcore bands at this point, it seems so stupid. I mean, so stupid. When, especially if you already had the experience of playing to Sonic Youth audiences, like, yeah, they put out a great hardcore record, 8 years ago or whatever, but my God, that's like the biggest, that's the most, I think the most frustrating thing looking back is that there were people, there's plenty of people, there were people that would have really responded to this, but that's why the audiences weren't growing. They just weren't being shown. They weren't there with it. It just seems like everything just misaligned by like a hair. And also, when I was saying with the October File being the longest gap ahead of its time, it seems like every subsequent record, that gap shortened until you get Cement, which is like, it's right there. And then, yeah. So it's like, yeah, the timing was just heartbreaking timing, devastating timing. But it also sounds like if you would have forced it, that's never going to work. If you're there begrudgingly, it's never going to work.
I agree 100%. And here we sit talking about this band that broke up in 92 or 94. Here we sit all these years later, 30 years later, and we're still talking about the band. So I think we managed our breakup fairly well.
Indeed. Yeah, there's always been a little bit of mystery to Die Kreuzen in my life. A little bit of mystery and intrigue there because I always heard the name. I knew there was so much there, and I knew I wasn't ready for it. That's another interesting thing because it takes time. It takes open-mindedness. It takes patience. This is a band that requires a lot of patience. But if you're along for the ride, I mean, there's really no one like them. Hugely influential to me as well with like guitar style too, especially with guitar playing. That was when I was a teenager playing in like punk bands and thrash bands. This is the stuff I was pulling inspiration from, like the crazy riffs, even like a riff like Pain. It's like what the fuck is that? That's not a punk riff.
What is that?
Yeah. And
very chord shapes, yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of those really dissonant, ugly chords. I mentioned Mel earlier on, where stuff like that, where it's, oh, this is evil as shit. This is super evil. And then you get Gone Away, which is like, even as a snobby, narrow-minded punk fan, you can't deny the catchiness of that song. Like it's like if you took, say, a Spell from Birthday Party and made it way more digestible and way more hooky and way more kind of heavy hitting. It's just as beautiful. And last note, because I'm rambling now, but closing Cement with an acoustic version of that song, also nice touch.
We were having fun. Let's try this. Let's try that. Why not do some acoustic stuff?
Passes the campfire test, right? If a song sounds good on acoustic guitar, I think you got a good song on your hands, right?
Yeah, yeah.
That's how Jesus Lizard wrote songs, I believe, just acoustically.
Wait, seriously?
Yeah, I think so. I if I'm not misremembering that, they would write it like in the living room with unplugged stuff. Because if it passed that test, then it would definitely pass the rest. Yeah.
I mean, I heard not that long ago that at least some of the early Minor Threat songs, Ian MacKaye wrote them on piano.
Whoa.
Not to tempo, obviously.
Maybe not to tempo.
Not to tempo, but he's like they were, they were born as him, figuring out the chords on piano because he has some level of piano training. But yeah, I mean, again, too, so like ahead of its time, but then, not long after the breakup, or even, I mean, a little bit before that, you start to hear things, and, later on, people are talking about how influential they are on them, and you point to a band like Slint, for example, like Dave Pajo is talking about how, he was thinking about Die Kreuzen when he's writing some of those riffs. To some people consider, Slint to kind of play a role in inventing an entirely new subgenre of music, right? And, one of those ingredients was, the music of Die Kreuzen, where later on you see everyone from like Matt Sweeney, who was in bands like Chavez, or, John Reese from Drive Like Jehu, or, Greg Anderson from Sun and Engine Kid and all these people. And they're not in the book, but I remember the first time I heard Cement, and there's a couple of those songs, they start with like just Keith playing some bass chords. And the first time I heard them, I was like, oh man, this kind of reminds me of Sunny Day Real Estate. Those guys were fans too, and so if not, like dismissed or maybe a little bit ignored at the time, the people who were listening were definitely listening and using that as fuel to go on to, make music of their own in the same way that these guys were when they were listening to, all the music that, was, part of their DNA early on, and the stuff that they would encounter, throughout their career.
Some of the most fun I've had doing this podcast is seeing the more drastic transformations and evolutions. Like one of my favorites of all time is Talk Talk, because you look at the first album and it's pure new wave, and you look at the last album, it's fucking post rock. It's like, well, all right. And Die Kreuzen is exactly the same. You show someone track 1 of Cows and Beer, and then you show them the final track of Cement, where it ends with the acoustic gone away. Like, what the hell happened? And it's over. I mean, it's over the course of 12 years, but it's also over the course of only like 4 albums, or more records than that, but 4 albums. It's so impressive to keep moving like that, and especially when the world seemingly was against you.
I might not go quite that far, but sure, yeah. They weren't exactly. We were definitely going uphill.
I mean, it's what a progression, right? It's like the first album is like 29 minutes, and it's like 20 or 21 songs. And the last one is 12 songs, and I believe it's almost an hour. So it's just, what a progression, right? And, nothing about it was forced. Nothing about it was forced. It was all very thoughtful and very intentional. And, they were not, pandering to anybody. It was just kind of like, they were going to make the music they were going to make. Sure, like they were a punk band and a hardcore band, but I think more than anything, I think they just wanted to play music, and they just kept doing that. And so, like you say, it's like, 4 different bands, like every album changed. It was just like these guys were just going to play music, and they were interested in music, and they were just going to keep doing it until they couldn't anymore. And that's kind of what happened.
So after the band breaks up, what do you do, Erik? What happened? Where does everyone just goes their separate ways? You stay in Milwaukee. Well, you didn't stay in Milwaukee,
but Dan and I tried to put something together with a different guitar player. We called it Chainfall. That was cool, and that was something we were going to submit to Mike Gitter up at Atlantic, but the guitar player decided to stick with his other band around Milwaukee. Keith got a deal with Louie Nelson and the Carnival Strippers, and they put out a record on Fox, so that was a pretty big deal. Keith was like, I got this going on, so he toured with them. I played with Killdozer for a while. I toured with Paul Kay and the Weathermen for a while, and had that crazy cool band that I joined in Milwaukee, Fuckface, which was loads of fun. Drums all over the place. Four drummers.
Whoa.
Band called D- in Milwaukee. I mean, just playing all the time. Drummers are in demand. So I think there were 4 or 5 bands I was playing in all at once at the same time, which happens all the time with drummers. Just living life.
That band that Keith was into, the Carnival Strippers, it should be noted that they have a song in the movie Speed. Um,
Oh, wow.
it's on the soundtrack, and it's I can't remember where in the movie it is. It might be in the credits, but it's definitely in the movie. Um, and like the book ends in 92 because I just kind of wanted to talk about what the four guys did as Die
Yeah,
Kreuzen. But
Of course.
talking to Keith about it, he's like, yeah, I finally got a taste of the major label experience, and I must say I was not a fan.
I've heard that before.
Yeah, you think, oh, it's gonna be so. Of course, any one of us who's a musician, it's just, yeah, at a certain age, you're like, oh, like it's gonna be great. We're gonna whatever be on MTV and get on a bus and this and that, and then you know you actually do it. And a few people I know have had experiences like that. They're like, yeah, it's not like that at all. It actually kind of really sucks.
Steve Albini wrote that. It was like a manifesto kind of thing, just
Oh,
detailing
yeah.
why you should never ever do it and how it will ruin your life.
So, I think he called some of your friends are already this fucked.
Yep. Classic.
Yeah.
Classic. We were
Yeah,
so
so-
lucky to be to be with Corey and Touch and Go. We were just so lucky. Honest, behind us all the way, good friends. Yeah, we were just luckier in that standpoint, luckier than any band really could ever hope to be.
One of the greatest labels of all time, easily.
Yep.
Oh yeah, you briefly mentioned it because you played on the Last Waltz, which is oddly enough, despite the fact that it's a live album, my favorite Killdozer album. I have a lot of like
Okay.
personal fondness for that one. I go way back with that album. What was like playing with Killdozer? I mean, that's that because I mean it all kind of comes together. Everything's interlaced with a bunch of Vig stuff.
Well, that was loads of fun. I enjoyed playing with Michael and Paul and Jeff Ditzenberger. I mean, I wasn't probably the best drummer for Killdozer, but I did my best to channel Dan Hobson. Try and play slow, try and play deliberately. Behind the beat. He's a really good drummer, and I had a lot of fun. Just trying to channel him. Although my hardcore rock tendencies would come through, I think that record is. I think I played stuff too fast. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. Michael said he enjoyed having me in the band, and Michael really treated me like an equal member of the band. So that was 100% great. So I got to do a lot of touring with them and have loads of fun. That was great. I loved it.
Awesome. And it sounds like things worked out. You're in Amsterdam. It sounds I'm a little bit jealous at the moment because beautiful place, of course. But
Beautiful
yeah.
place.
yeah, it sounds like I think looking back at everything, yeah, maybe Die Kreuzen didn't blow up to a massive level or get on a major label, but it feels a little bit more personal and how do I say it without sounding too cheesy, but like spiritually fulfilling the way the journey that they had with this thing. It feels so much more honest and like honest and human, I would say.
I like that. Yeah. Again, here we are 30 years after the breakup, still talking about it. The book came out. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
Great
Yeah,
book.
pleased
Yeah,
and proud
great
of the way
book.
this has all happened.
Absolutely. Everyone check out the book. I mean, yeah, it's an easy read too. And it's especially if you come from like a punk background and you're interested in that whole scene, it's a different side of the punk scene because you can read American hardcore and stuff and get like a lot of different pictures, but it's also such a different thing when the band stops playing hardcore and those fans are not the most malleable fans, very sometimes rigid and closed-minded and angry. So it's just a whole different side of like what is originally supposed to be this very open-minded, anything goes scenes. Like many things, just becomes very rigid and almost totalitarian in some ways. So it's a whole different experience. Seeing the insights of what you guys went through is very well done. So Sahan, I mean, excellent job. I know it was a massive undertaking to write that book.
Yeah, it's I mean, just the music connected with me in a way, and being from Milwaukee myself, I felt a lot of pride. And when I started to piece together how significant they were, it just made sense. Like, there's not really much out there about this band. I think it's time to tell their story. And of course, I'm not the only one who feels this way. And in moving to Amsterdam and running a cafe for so long, there was definite Die Kreuzen fans who somehow figured out that Erik ran a cafe. It was also right next to a pretty prominent venue there called, is it the Melkweg? Is that how you say that, Eric?
Yeah,
The
yeah.
Melkweg. There's people who, someone come into the kitchen like, hey, Eric, there's someone here to see you. And, you know, tons of people. I mean, I think, Eric, if you want to mention probably one of the more memorable experiences you had with that.
Well, I mean, there was just lots of really cool people. Somebody that used to be the sound man for DOA, he flat out just recognized me. His name was Hutch, and he came through when he was doing sound for Queens of the Stone Age. And then a little later, when Dave Grohl and and Josh and Mr. John Paul Jones, suddenly they're sitting at our bar, and it was a lovely moment. I had never met the guys before, but it really was nice. Hey, let's talk about this, that, and the other thing. So that was sweet. But just all the bands that came through. I mean, it's a very, very prominent music venue. Die Kreuzen played there. Killdozer played there. So that was fun to be running the cafe where I had dinner all those years before. But yeah, it was a good scene. And yeah, people would occasionally, I would know they were coming, or sometimes they'd show up and Brant Bjork, reaches over and, hey, did you really play Die Kreuzen? Because I'm talking with my friends up there. Well, yeah. So that was, it was really cool. It was great to be inside there. It is part of the reason that they chose, I mean, we put together a nice business plan, my wife and I, but it is part of the reason they chose us. Okay, you guys, you're part of the family already. You know what our rock and rollers and our musicians and our theater people are going to need. So, and we did it for 18 years.
Beautiful.
And I saw that enthusiasm from people, and hearing stories like this, and I just knew, like, okay, there's already this sort of built-in audience of people who love this band and they're like really diehard fans of this band. But there's plenty of people who've never heard them before, right? And we're at a time now where I think audiences are far more open-minded than they were 25, 30, 35 years ago. We look at a time now where there's bands that get called hardcore who they're just super melodic now, and there's bands that come from that crowd who, they've heard other things, be it, the Smashing Pumpkins or, My Bloody Valentine or something like that. And they're pivoting towards music that's like equal parts heavy and melodic and dreamy, right? Like that thing has, there's quite a bit of people who like that kind of thing now. And I feel like the time is right for people to hear these records. So, I just kind of took it upon myself to do my best to try and expose it to, a new audience, as big of a new audience as I can.
Well, I think I can speak for anyone else who shared my confusion over the years. There's no more mystery. You can hear it all very accessibly. You can learn about it all, and you should. It's great. So thank you to both of you so much for spending this time and going through each record. Yeah, wonderful stuff. Everyone needs to check them out and be enriched. Yeah. So thank you very much. Very much.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you for inviting me, sir.
Now that was super fun. One of the things that I enjoyed most about that interview, I forgot what it's like to talk to someone who knows about punk. Aside from some of the people on the Patreon. So go to the Patreon, by the way. Good time. Got some great music nerds on the Patreon. In terms of face-to-face-ish, voice-to-voice, I haven't talked to someone about punk in so long. Someone who knows their shit. Sahan knows his shit, obviously. It was super refreshing that I name dropped a band like Trevi Cadet, knowing that he's gonna know who they are. I don't have to preface it like, oh, there's this Finnish punk band and they put this one record that was amazing and the rest are kind of crazy. That is what Trevi Cadet is. They put out one brilliant hardcore punk EP that is 5 minutes long. I think it's literally 5 minutes long, actually. And then they put out a bunch of albums that are fucking crazy and very unusual. And I don't remember what they sound like. I should probably go back to Trevi Cadet. What a crazy episode Trevi Cadet would be. Actually, maybe I'll do that someday. But it was great to just fully indulge in my hardcore punk geekdom, because it's been a long time. It's been a long time. And going back to these Die Kreuzen albums, I was able to appreciate them so much more. I still have some issues with certain albums, but they're issues that I wasn't expecting. And the issues actually never have to do with the songwriting, which I found to be interesting, or almost never to do with the songwriting. So as for my picks, I'm giving Cows and Beer, the first EP from 1983, personal favorite. And I have to get this personal favorite because I have to. I just have to. It was the first thing I heard from them. I was floored. There's a few punk records that I've heard in my life when I was younger that absolutely amaze me. One was the aforementioned TV Cadet, was the Ariaton Yolu EP from 1982. That one fucking amazed me. The first three records from Social Unrest, that amazed me. Cows and Beer amazed me. The songwriting was just so good. It was so creative. The guitar work inspired me to high hell. I was a total copycat of Brian, really. Just the crazy chords he would do. It was so unusual for punk, and it was so unusual that it was so tight. I mean, it's sloppy in its essence, but it's really tight in its execution. And the songwriting is just unmatched. It's a perfect hardcore punk EP. It's perfect. It's truly perfect. There's a few different versions online. The version streaming, like we talked a little bit about in the interview, the track listing is different. Like Sahan said, it probably was just a little bit of negligence in the uploading process, which is unfortunate. But you can go on YouTube, whatever. The official, the true sequencing is flawless. The pacing of it is just absolutely perfect. It's an incredible EP. In terms of hardcore punk, if you've never tried it, if you're curious about it, it is Cows and Beer by Die Kreuzen, Pick Your King by Poison Idea, Minor Threats self-titled 7-inch, Ariaton Yolu by TV Cadet. Yeah, I wouldn't know what else to name at the top of my head anyway. In terms of just raw hardcore punk, it doesn't get better than that. There's a strong argument for the Bad Brains. Yes, of course, Bad Brains. But Bad Brains, the Roar tape also has a bunch of fucking reggae stuff. So that's the only, it's reggae. If you want a raw, perfect, contained, really brief, these records are all under 10 minutes. Yeah, you got to go here. And I hate to be boring. And I hate to sound like everyone else, but self-titled from 1984, I'm giving that one best. Because I have to. Damn it. It's just beyond, it's just perfect. It's yet another perfect record. It's the pinnacle of hardcore punk. I think it's the best hardcore punk album. Because I've gone on record saying Bad Brains are probably the best hardcore punk band. And yeah, they're fucking the greatest. But in terms of LP, full length hardcore punk LP, there's a lot of good ones, but there's far less good ones than there are EPs. EPs are made for hardcore punk. Short songs. Yes, they do the one thing. They play fucking fast and rudely. They play rudely and fast. EP. Have it go on for 5 minutes. There it is. 7 minute record. There it is. You get your fill. You're not exhausted by the end of it. It's actually kind of hard to pull off like full LPs for hardcore punk bands. This Side Up by Scream was really goddamn good. I felt it was just too fucking long. 40 minutes for a hardcore punk LP feels like an eternity to me. And that's like my only problem with that album. This is, not only is it the perfect length, it's so beyond. It's just maximized. The performances are tighter than any other band. The choices are way weirder, crazier, and more frantic than any other band. The vocals are black metal screeches, basically. They're better than every other. There's not just a snarly guy yelling anymore. The production is this weird, metallic, shiny, shimmering, echoey thing that should be really off-putting and unflattering to songs this fast and busy, but actually, it's just weird. It's just weird and kind of eerie. So it has so many things working for it. It's just such a one-of-a-kind record. It's the absolute peak of what hardcore punk is capable of. And it's honestly the perfect year for it. 84. That's it. That's the end, baby. At that point, 84 is when things start to turn into noise rock or in alt rock and metal and whatever the fuck else came out in the mid to late 80s. 84 is Meat Puppets 2, where things start to get weirder. 84 is Zen Arcade. 84 is Double Nickels on the Dime, which is still punky, but also very ambitious. 84 is like, all right, we're moving away. We're getting done. We're getting tired of just short, fast songs. We have to really. So this is like, all right, this is the end. This is the end for hardcore. This is how fucking good it is. You're not going to top this. You're not going to top it. It's the best. Going back to these albums, I gave personal favorite to Cows and Beer because I have to, and it's goes so far back for me, and it's nostalgic, and it's perfect for what it is. I really, really wanted to give Octoberfile personal favorite. So that would be like an honorable mention, I guess. Octoberfile is so goddamn underrated. And I think Touch and Go is reissuing it in April or something like that. I believe I saw that. So I'm probably going to pick that one up. That sounds pretty fucking cool. It's wild. It's such a wild album. It does so many different things. And the fact that there's still some hardcore punk on here, like 2 or 3 songs, in a way, when I learned about the band and what happened on this time period, and it seems more like, well, they had the songs left over from the previous album. They threw them on here just for completion, whatever. And it also kind of helped to break up the album a little bit. It doesn't really feel like the hardcore punk songs in this album on Octoberfile are transitioning into a new sound. It feels like it's part of the chaos of this particular album. This is an album that does a million different things, and I think it does them all extremely well. The only problem I have with it is the production. It sounds good, but one, it doesn't have the absurdity that the self-titled album has. Where what I mean by that is that it self-titled is echoey and reverby and cold for a hardcore punk record, which doesn't make any sense. It's very crazy. It's a similar production to this one, but these songs are not hardcore punk songs. So instead of it feeling like a bizarre production, it just feels like a fine production. It still feels like it's just like a regular, fine, fairly spacious production. I think it takes some of the power and the kick out of a lot of the songs, a lot of these songs are written like they kick so much ass, but production feels a little bit thin. But even still, it has some of their absolute best songs. God damn, There's a Place. It's basically a birthday party song, which it's so infectious. It's so great. Counting Cracks, like the way they write riffs, Counting Cracks is such an unbelievable main riff. It's so unique. No riff has ever been written like that. It's just incredible. It rules. Check out Octoberfile. Check out, all the albums, whatever. I'm moving on. Now to give my worst, least favorite. I'm going to be lazy, baby. I'm going to be lazy. Gone Away. The compilation from 1989. Despite the fact that the song Gone Away is one of their absolute best songs and one of the greatest alt-rock songs of all time, the compilation it's an easy worst. It's got covers, it's got live tracks, and it's got Cows and Beer in the wrong order. The cover of Seasons of Weather is actually very good. I'm not a huge Aerosmith guy, although does rock. It's a good cover. It fits in well. But really, this EP and compilation is one original song. One original song, a bunch of live tracks, and some covers. And Cows and Beer with the wrong track listing. So it's an easy worst. Still, Gone Away is one of those songs that if I'm gonna recommend a song to show off later Die Kreuzen, it's gonna be Gone Away. 10 times out of 10. It's just so damn good. Yeah, those are my picks, and this was such a goddamn fun episode to do. So yeah, infinite thanks to Erik and Sahan, because this is it's fulfilling teenage Mike's dreams. And who doesn't want to do that? You all want to fulfill my dreams when I was a teenager. But that about does it for this one. So thank you so much for listening, watching, hanging out. If you want to support me, you know what to do. Like the goddamn video. You know how to do it. It's right there. Press the goddamn thumb. It's easy. Subscribe if you want. Although, if you're not going to watch more of my videos, don't subscribe. You have no obligation to subscribe if you don't want to watch more of this. So don't do it. You can also talk some shit in the comments. Tell me why I'm wrong and bad at things. But it's a lot cooler if you just say I'm right and I'm rad at things. Follow me on all social media at PanderMonkey. Follow my music, also PanderMonkey. Links to all that in the description. But most importantly, for the love of Christ, go to the Patreon. All right, I need to eat. All right, we all need to eat, but I am hungry. I haven't had dinner yet, actually. But seriously, go to the Patreon. Patreon.com/everyalbumever. There we got bonus episodes. I try to do 2 bonus episodes a month where I react to and review all the albums that you send me, all the patrons send me. If you're tier 1, you can suggest any album from anywhere and I'll do bonus episodes and reactions on it. If you're tier 2, then you can suggest any album from anywhere in the world and I'll do main feed episodes, big, longer, more thoroughly edited, nice, cool videos. You can see the schedule in advance. You can join the Discord, be a part of the community, talk shit, talk shop, talk music, and vote on polls. Every month I take 3 of your requests and I put them on a poll and you decide which one gets a full discography episode like this one. Although probably not with a member of the band unless I get lucky. You never know. Actually, you never know. It can happen. At the moment, the second poll of the year is underway, and as of recording this, it is way too soon to tell who I think is going to win. Except for the fact that I'm pretty guaranteed one of them is going to... I'm almost... I lied. I know which one's going to win. I feel like I know which one's going to win. It was not what I originally thought was going to win, but it's probably going to win. And fuck it, I'm excited. I'm excited. So if you want to sway the tides, go to Patreon. Hell yes. But until the next one, see ya.